Welcome to Warrior Wisdom and Wellness. Your hostess, Diane Young.
Hello everyone, I'm Diane Young, a retired Marine and the current president of the Starfish Foundation that raises funds so that veterans can attend the Healing Warrior Hearts programs at no further expense to themselves. I'm really excited today to be here with Michael Orban. He is the author of Sold Out, the Conquering the Experiences of War. And he's a Vietnam veteran, and I know he's got a lot to cover with us, so I'm just going to welcome Mike. Welcome, and thanks for being here with us today, Mike.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Tell a little bit about yourself as well.
Sure. Well, I'm one of 10 children raised in Wauwatosa, drafted into the military in 1968, and served with the 1st Cavalry Division in Vietnam for a year. And since then, coming home, having been through a really extraordinarily difficult, in my opinion, transition from the military to civilian life that took a mere 30 years or so. I'm now really respectfully and grateful to be part of sharing the experience in an educational way to improve the transition for those veterans coming behind us, to make it a little bit easier and more educational and rational to go from the military to civilian life, not just for ourselves but for our families, in a more rapid way, more healthy way, and get onto some joy and some dreams in life.
Nice, thank you. And speaking of Waukesha, didn't you go to school locally and then used that to further serve veterans?
I did, well, actually, Wauwatosa. I went to Wauwatosa East High School, graduated there. But one of the things that we had spoken about before, I remember very, very distinctly being in Vietnam the day before I was going to come home, and thinking to myself that I was going home to life exactly as it had been before the war. I was going home to the same friends, same activities, same dreams, or my girlfriend, my wife at the time, who had become my wife, all of the things that had been there before. And when I got home, I couldn't have been more mistaken at how dramatically different everything was from my friends, from my activities. The two dreams I had while in Vietnam were the GI Bill for college, and to go home and see my wife, and both of those ended very quickly after I got home. So there was a period of all of the isolation, the anger, the rage, the guilt, the nightmares, the panic attacks, and I can go on and on and on. Isolation, the numbing, the facade, the stigmas, for 30 years before I got to the point that I was so mentally exhausted from the battle of trying to make the world believe or fit into the idea of what the world wanted me to see as a soldier. You know, that this is the stigma, this is what I have to show the world that I am. Father being a World War II veteran, and my older brother a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division. The fatigue got so bad that I was actually suicidal. And not because, whoa, I couldn't take this. It was more, my mind is so damaged it'll never repair. So I turned myself in for inpatient treatment at the VA hospital in Toma, and credit them with saving my life. So I got to that point, and then it was after the recovery, writing the book to get some of these issues and reactions out of my head so that I could see them and then undertake resolving them. And when I got to that point where I was significantly more in control of the nightmares, more in control of the reactions, understood them, resolved them, and accepted a lot of them, that I was able to turn that around and use that same experience now educationally to help the veterans coming behind us. And as I mentioned earlier, when I see veterans who are struggling, I see myself in them. So that is really part of the healing as well, to get to that next step of not being internalized and isolated, but the joy of getting outside, and now you can see the world again. Now you can see the birds, and you can see the colors, and you can see a little bit of joy, and you can turn that around into a real passion and compassion to help veterans coming from behind. So with the Medical College of Wisconsin and Dr. Michael McBride and some of the medical students, we started the Warrior Partnership, which has been, I believe, in its 11th year now, and now includes Dr. Greg Burrick, a Marine who served in Iraq. And of course participating in the John D. Mason Veteran Peer Outreach and some of the other groups and organizations in southeast Wisconsin that are dedicated to improving that transition and the health, not just for the veteran, but now focusing much more on the veteran family as well. So all of those are things that I'm proud to participate in, proud and really passionate about participating in, because again, I can't turn my back because I see myself in these people. So it might seem that I'm actually doing this to help other veterans. This is part of the healing that I'll do for the rest of my life.
Very nice. That's actually where I met Mike first, I think, is at one of the veteran outreach organizations. So I appreciate you being out there and being of service to veterans, being the face of hope when sometimes it doesn't seem like there is any hope. And I appreciate you being so authentic and sharing how you felt and what you experienced. And that led you to your podcast of ending the stigma through education, right?
Well, I think the stigma is probably, not probably, is the number one thing that kept me from going forward to ask for help. Everything immediately was mental illness, and I was not going to accept it. Again, a father who was a World War II veteran, a brother who is a paratrooper, plus a community that doesn't want us to, as soldiers or as veterans, to show that we are anything but people who have lived up to our responsibilities as soldiers, and we have no cracks, nothing wrong with us. We've never had any issues. We don't have any mental illness. We are perfectly fine and have gone through everything we have gone through and upheld our responsibilities as soldiers. And that was the biggest fallacy ever. I mean, there's no way that I could have gone through Vietnam as an infantry soldier and not had these issues. That would have been more insane to me.
Right.
Yeah, so yes, I'll leave it there.
Thanks. I appreciate that. I've heard your podcast several times, and I appreciate that by sharing these stories, other people, other veterans can relate and realize that somebody else made it through, and that gives them hope that they can get through too. So thank you.
Right. Well, one of the things that I've noticed over the years, there are many, many different reactions to the experiences we have in the military. So in other words, at least in my belief, however many people served in the military, that's how many reactions you have. So I can't speak because of my MOS to all of the experiences, all the MOSs that have had some reaction coming home that need some attention. But one of the primary things that I did see, Diane, was that when I was isolating, did not go to workshops. I did not go to seminars. I did not go out in public. I did not go for help. There was no way that anybody was going to find me or that I was going to be declaring that I had these issues that I needed answers for. That's why we started the podcast. It doesn't replace seminars or workshops, but together with them, we can reach out to veterans. Well, they're in their isolation, as I was, with their dried out pizza in the basement and cigarette butts and the empty beer cans and everything else. We could reach into the isolation where I was. But it was a matter of getting together, as your podcast will do, all the voices that can provide to the listening audience, to that person that said, aha, that's the experience I'm having. That gives me hope. If she can go and ask for help, if he can go and ask for help, so can I.
Right.
So it's part of being a team of all the guests that come on the podcast to put together all of these voices that give hope, as you said, huge word, and confidence, and the trust, because people will trust us as veterans more so than they will trust anyone. And if they trust us and believe in us, more likely that they'll reach out and ask for help, ask for answers, ask for education.
Direction. Resources. That's all really important. Thank you.
Right.
I know as veterans, we're not, if they wanted us to have emotions, they would have issued them to us, right? And so as a retired Marine, PTSD was not in my vocabulary. And, we're taught to adapt and overcome, and that doesn't fit, with that image, if you will, or it wasn't part of, what we dealt with typically on active duty, or addressed maybe on active duty, even if we were dealing with it. And so, like you mentioned, the same situation might affect each of us differently. And so I think your point of having different experiences is really important. So if somebody else had a situation that might not seem as bad as yours, that doesn't mean that they might not be impacted by it and still dealing with some PTSD from it. So I think it's really important, the points that you bring out during your podcast, and be able to share some stories so that people can relate to it and realize that there are others that have gone through it, and maybe resources whether you want to call it PTSD or whatever we need to call it, just get involved and find some support, I think is really the important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the resources that are out there. And if we have time, I would share this. When we enter the military, we go through training. We're trained. I'm trained in battlefield medicine. I'm trained in hand-to-hand combat. I'm trained in what to do if we're in an ambush. I'm trained in how to do all the different tactics. We're trained in the buddy system. Think of all the training that we go through. But imagine if you just went into the military and they handed you your weapon, handed you a rucksack and said, okay, you're going to Iraq, you're going to Afghanistan, you're going to Korea, you're going to Vietnam, and you get to the battlefield. You have no training at all, just the weapon. And somebody said, okay, well, we're in a firefight. Well, I don't know how to load my weapon. Well, if you don't know how to load your weapon, go help that man or that woman with the sucking chest wound. Help. Well, I don't know how. Well, then go over and help those guys stop them. I don't know how. They would say, what the hell are you doing here? Are you mentally ill? But,
Not yet.
But they don't do that because you've been given the training.
Right.
So they know you need the training. When you go into this change of culture or and dramatic change, life or death, of skills and trades and life. Now when we go home, why they must understand, mental health must understand, psychiatrists must know, you're going to make this dramatic change from culture to culture, from experience to experience. You needed it then, you need it now, but they don't give it to us. You have to provide this yourself. And that's why I'm so big on this idea. This is education. Now you're coming back, they want to say you're mentally ill, but let's think about what they would have done if we weren't trained in the military. We got to the battlefield or got to wherever we were assigned in transportation. Drive that, well, I don't know how to drive the truck. Well, what are you doing in transportation? You were trained. And it's the same thing for me, and I'm sorry if I'm passionate about this, but train us for these reactions you're going to have. How many of us came home and didn't expect the nightmares, didn't expect the panic attacks, the isolation, the numbing, the emotional numbing? I was never given a document that said, look for these things, and when they come home, here's where you can find the resources to help you on that. That's education. No, right away they want to stamp you with mental illness or whatever it might be. So I'm very, very big on just the rationale that when you come home, this stigma, we try to be, and I did this, we try to be what we think the world wants us to be, what they're expecting us to be. We try to fulfill that and do everything we can with this facade that everything's fine, and we want to impress on the world that what they want us to see, what they expect us to be, we are. So we try to do that, while the actuality, the truth of what we have is inside of us, and that's what we annihilate with drinks and drugs and depression and everything else, the truth inside of us. We don't want anybody to see the actual truth. It should be the opposite. You've done for your country what you're supposed to. You've fulfilled your military obligation. You don't owe those people anything before you owe yourself and your family the exact opposite, and that's to educate yourself and get the resources so that within the walls of your home, you're providing a safe, secure, happy place to be. That's how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So much I could respond to that one. So right away, as we leave the military, a lot of times we somehow end up at the VA looking for a service-connected disability so that we can receive benefits. And if we're at least that far, then we're in the right direction. And so that's where the mental illness label comes in, if you will. And it is, as disturbing as that can be for anyone coming out of the military to hear those words, or PTSD, it is a medical necessity so that they have method of treatment and can create their plan. So I would say to all the veterans, just accept, whatever that diagnosis is and label, and just keep moving forward.
Yes.
Maybe it fits, maybe it doesn't, and it's nobody else's business as long as they're getting the help that they need. And if one method is not working, advocate for yourself, please, so that you can get the help that you need.
Right, absolutely. And the answers are there, the resources are there. And one of the things that I'm very, very ashamed of in myself, having 9 brothers and sisters, and of course a wife at the time, I don't have children, thank goodness, was the focus was on me. I was at war, I was in the military, I have nightmares, I have anxiety, I have these things, I have the all the triggers that scare people and all of this, the anger, the rage, it was all about me. And I never took into consideration my brothers and sisters until in 2018 when I was offered to go on the honor flight to Washington, D.C. And I said, well, I don't really want to go. And my sister Mary said to me, Mike, your family also needs to heal. And after 45 years, I was shocked. In 45 years, I'd never thought about my family. And I think now when I mention that to veterans, they're more inclined to want to go and get help if they realize when we entered the military, we're all standing there in our dress uniforms, the family's there, the songs, the John Philip Sousa marching songs and Pride and everything else. When we come home, we're standing alone. We have to switch that and make sure that we take responsibility for our children, our families as well. And if we don't want to get help for ourselves, at least provide the resources for our family to get help so they can start to understand us. Why does my husband or my wife jump up in the middle of the night and choke me? Or why so isolated? Why so emotionally distanced? Why no intimacy, emotional intimacy? And find these things out. And I think veterans might be a little bit more inclined to go and ask for that help if they know they're helping their family. And it's not just for themselves.
Yep. So as service members, it was never about us. It was about us being a leader and us being a unit. And so it's not natural for us to necessarily put ourselves first, which is really important with mental health.
Yes, it is.
And so when you talk about, that just makes it more normal too, to put that in that concept. So it's really important. I'm glad you gave that example to look out for our families too, because they often didn't know how to support us and didn't understand what was happening.
Well, and logically, if we think about it, when I was in Vietnam or when I was in the military, I knew exactly where I was. I knew if I was in trouble. I knew if there was some danger there. Our families, including my mother, had to live in their imagination of where I was. Is he sick? Is he in trouble? There's a news on the report that 27 soldiers were in an ambush and 9 were killed and 14 were wounded or something. My mom doesn't know. My nine brothers and sisters don't know if I was there. In their imagination, they're worrying. A car pulls up in front of the house that they don't know of. Is that somebody coming to tell me that something's... They don't know. So that might have been much more punishing for them because living in your imagination can be more punishing. But I know when I, interviewed Dr. Kenneth Lee at the VA hospital, who was a military commander, a medical commander in Iraq and severely wounded and sent home, that he told me 2 things that were very, very critical that made a lot of sense to me. He was playing a game with his family, and his younger daughter looked at him and said, "Daddy, how come you don't smile anymore?" Aww. And he said, that's what he did. He said it broke his heart. And that's when he started going for help. And he said, Mike, the real casualty of war is the family.
Oh, yeah.
And this was only 3 years ago that he said this. I've been out of the service for 50 years, and never did I look at it from the standpoint that the family is really the casualty of war as a unit. The same as the family was there as a unit when we go to war. So I think we're, as your organization and Ellen, all of us, by taking our experiences of what we've been through and what we've seen, we can hope that tomorrow, by all of our voices, we're making this transition better. And I think it's that experience, not that we have it, not that we have a panacea, we can tell you what the answers are, but we're qualified to be in this conversation that makes that better for everybody who took the oath to serve in the military, no matter what the outcome was.
Absolutely.
That's the way that I look at it.
Absolutely, thank you.
Even though I wasn't a Marine.
Yeah, well, we can't all be Marines. And I hope you won't hold that against me. I lost my train of thought there. As far as families go, Healing Warrior Hearts has a couples retreat coming up in December. So if you or other veterans that you know of could benefit from a safe place to discuss, how trauma, whether it's PTSD or the memories or the guilt or shame or whatever is associated with military service, that's a safe place for them to come, and that's the first weekend of December. So anybody interested in that retreat can register at healingwarriorhearts.org.
I could add to that if you want.
Please.
When I went to Toma, after I went in the year 2000, so I'd been home for 30 years, almost 30 years, and I walked in, this was for inpatient treatment, and the first day that I walked into this group meeting, and there were the other veterans. I almost started crying.
Yeah.
Because in my head I was saying, I'm home. This
Yeah.
is where I belong. These are the only other people I will trust.
Yeah.
And I had been to psychiatrists in private at the VA, and nothing against any of them, I don't have that. But these experiences in the military, whatever they were so intimately intense that I had to trust. But it was important that I be with other people who had similar experiences. And that's what you're saying for these retreats on the weekend. Go and be with people who have similar experiences that you can trust, who can relate. I don't know if I should say this on your podcast, but I have 5 sisters, and my sister said to me, if you want to know what it's like to be pregnant and give birth to a child, ask a woman who's been pregnant and given birth to a child. Don't ask a male gynecologist.
Well,
So there's that starting place, and the starting place before you go to outside sources would be other veterans. It's just very, very comforting.
And finding out that you're not alone.
And not alone.
That was really key for me.
Yeah.
And you reminded me of what my earlier thought was, is that the experiences will vary from veteran to veteran, from VA to VA, and we have 2 different references here of how the VA has worked. And there's a ton of other resources. Obviously, the Toma VA was very helpful for you.
Yeah.
The Madison VA is my primary care provider, and they've done very well for me. I really wasn't open to the VA until I went through Healing Warrior Hearts, and they encouraged me to get involved.
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful, for my experience there. I would say that if you can be thinking of some resources you might want to throw out here, I would say for veterans, maybe the VA is a good resource to start with. Maybe your Veterans Services Officer is a place to start. If you don't want to deal with the bureaucracy, if you will, of either of those, which I think has gotten better over the years, maybe the Vet Center, they are very helpful as well and can help in a number of different situations that you might be surprised about. So if you're interested, check out the Vets Center. Did you have any others?
Every state has the County Veteran Service Officer. I think would be the most critical, because people assume that the county, or think that the County Veteran Service Officer is employed by the VA. They're not. They're employed by the county. It's the County Veteran Service Officer who is not attached to the VA in any way. But their responsibility is to act as the really support for us, the individual veteran, to provide you with all the benefits that you're entitled to. And you'd be surprised, all the way from a free pass to the county parks, to your education, to your medical, to your mental health. They will tell you, it should be the first stop for every veteran, to go there and find out what, by your service, these are the things you're entitled to. Here's your housing loan that you're entitled to, educational benefits. That would be the first place. As far as organizations are concerned, you mentioned some of the better ones. I know that Mark Foreman, a very good friend of mine, started the Homeless Veterans Initiative. I mean, that's certainly a place for our homeless veterans to get some help. Dry Hooch does a really good job for veterans who feel comfortable with that sort of environment. The VA is there. I mean, there are just so many different organizations. I've been doing work recently with the High Ground Veterans Memorial up in Neillsville, which is doing this weekend a woman veterans retreat. They've done the male veterans retreat, so they have a lot of support there. And if they don't have them, you can reach out to them, and they will provide you some of the networking veterans organizations that are resources for you. I know that there is I'd have to find out, and we could find it on, you'll be having this on your website, but it's on mine because I'll share it with you. Crisis Intervention Team at Northwest, I can't remember what it is, but Deb Pergandy, who was the director of the Inpatient Treatment Center at Toma, has left there after many years and is now in 27 counties, I believe, as part of a rapid response team. So those are out there, but there's many organizations. Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm sorry, but I don't belong there, but that's certainly, I have friends who belong there, and that saved their lives.
Absolutely.
Rogers Memorial is a good resource for some drugs. And again, there are people who say, well, I went there and it didn't work. But just keep trying until you find the one that works for you. The VA, to me, is always going to be the place that saved my life. I know other people are not going to find that as satisfactory. I would also say that, yes, I promote education, but that isn't, for some people, medication's a godsend, and so, you find that path that's good for you. It's for other people, it might be religion, it might be God, it might be a chaplain at the VA hospital or somewhere. Just figure out what your issue is. I think if we were to take a sequence, for me, the sequence would be to acknowledge that you have an issue and acknowledge that you want to go and find what are the educational or mental health, whatever you want to call them, assets that you can use to resolve those issues that you're having. And once you get to that, you've already conquered the most important part. That's to acknowledge you have it, try to find the answers, and from there, once you acknowledge, then the doors are going to open up to all these different places because people are going to share them with you.
Yep. So if you need help and you're not finding it, get a hold of any one of us and we'll be glad to find out for you. If we don't have the answer, we probably know where to find it.
The War Memorial is doing wonderful things. They're having different issues. Patricia Clayson is doing a lot with her organizations. So, I mean, if they were to contact you or contact me, we could certainly provide them with different assets. And then just keep asking these, the different resources that you're given if they know additional resources. So, but don't give up. Just keep trying because they're out there.
Exactly. There is hope. Thank you. So I know we're almost out of time. I'm going to ask you 2 more questions.
Okay.
Maybe it'll run together. My favorite question is, if you could teach the world or veterans just one thing, what would it be?
No question about it. And that is this whole idea of stigma, of PTSD, of I'm an invincible warrior, I've gone through this, I have no issues, I cannot show the world that I'm going to spend all of my time and all of my energy is trying to put on this face that I think the world needs to see me as, that they want me to see. I'm pretending, I'm being what I think the world wants me to be, rather than really understanding and reacting to what I really feel the truth inside me is. I think that would be more important than anything else, because as long as I hid those things, the truth inside me from the world, because I wanted them to see this perfect soldier, you're not going anywhere. I think stop trying to be what you think the world wants you to be, and be who you really are, and identify who you are. And secondly, don't look at the experiences of the military. That's something that should stop you. Let this be something that inspires you to take all the experiences of your life and now be from who was telling you what your reality is to being the person that tells you what your reality is, that forms, that creates the form of your spirit, rather than is the result of someone else who created the form of your spirit. Take control of your life. I think that would be a really... That's 2 answers.
Yeah, no, that's great, because that way you're becoming who you really are and who you want to be. Sure. And really what you're describing is self-care, I think. Well,
self-care and self-development, but if I stop and think from the time that I was born until the time I entered the military, and then more profoundly in the military, I always had a teacher. My mother, my family, teachers, social laws, the priests, whatever, my religion, social laws, patriotism, honor, and then you go into the military, and then you've got the drill sergeant. This is what you're going to be, this is how you're going to be, and almost everything you do in the military is going to have an Article 15 that compels you to do it, or a court-martial. So now when you get out of the military at 22 or 21 as I was, you have all of these 21 years where somebody has always been teaching you who you are and what your reality is, how you're going to respond, how you're going to interact. Now you get out of there, and you're in my case, that reality has almost completely failed. It doesn't associate or doesn't work anymore when I'm home.
Right.
So I have never been told, okay, well, that reality didn't work. Let's just create a new reality. It doesn't work. All of a sudden, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know, nothing makes sense anymore. All these, to a certain extent, and for me, a large extent, this reality, or how I look at the world has failed, is not working anymore. So I get into depression, I get into alcohol, I get into what's going to help me sleep, I get into suicidal thinking, all of these things, because I'm responding to what I think. And what I think is, this isn't working. The primary thing for me would be, don't be afraid of that. Take all of these experiences you have. That form of all of these people and sequences in life have created your spirit. Now that is all collapsed. Now take all of this and take that spirit and now create the form. reverse it, and that's the power we have. Instead of letting this all be this thing that drags us down for the rest of our life, let it be an asset. And at least in my experience, and the veterans who have most successfully gone through the transition have gone to a higher level because they're improving the human spirit by helping other people. And what greater joy can there be for those of us who know what it's like to be on the downside of that?
Yeah. I think you just nailed it, recognizing it as transition.
Yes, it is.
It's not that it's all screwed up and it's ineffective. It's just done, and now we're transitioning into, this next chapter, if you will.
And taking all of these experiences wrapped up in, well, okay, so they were dramatically different than what you expected. You have expectations, and the reality of what happened, they were so dramatically different. My expectation going into the military versus what actually was there, shattered. I mean, they're so dramatically different. But yet, you take these experiences, and the great freedom is now to rebuild this all to something that you see that now explains what the world is really like to you through your own eyes, not through the eyes of all of these other people that told you what it should be like.
Yep, making sense out of it all.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I would like for you to leave us with a reference to your podcast and share what you have coming up, please.
Oh, sure, I really would. I'd love to. Our podcast is designed, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, to reach out to veterans who are struggling in isolation, to reach out to families, because a lot of times families have a stigma because they're also part of a family who's not supposed to have a veteran who's struggling, or so they think.
Yeah, right.
So they're in isolation. And the idea of the podcast is to bring on guests who have all add their voice and their experience to the overall voices that reach out to the veterans and their families and the audience, for not to heal every veteran, not to help every veteran, but the total voices, add the team of voices, will reach out to that one or that 1,000 veterans who will hear that and say, that's the voice I needed to hear. If she can do it, if he can do it, I can do it. That gives me hope, and I'm going to go and get the resources that I need. It's not a podcast where Mike Orban is sitting there telling everybody, and this is my experience. It's really the voices of all of us that are assembling to help the people coming up behind us who need the answers. So we right now are podcasting twice a month on Friday, second Friday and last Friday of every month, or every 2 weeks on Friday. And our podcasts are available on Stitcher, Spotify, iHeart, Apple, and a couple of others. I don't remember what they are right now. But they're also available on our website at the podcast page of Orban Foundation for Veterans.org. That's my name, Orban Foundation for Veterans.org. And the only reason that I started the name Orban Foundation for Veterans, a lot of people think it's arrogant. If you try to go to GoDaddy and get a domain name and you want it to be ABC-4, you won't find it, because somebody bought up all of those acronyms, the first 4 letters at any combination, and you can buy them for $15,000 or $20,000. Try and think of a name that nobody has. And somebody finally said, after days of trying to think, just call it by your name. So I did that, Orban Foundation for Veteran, and I received, that I started when I received my honorary doctorate from the Medical College of Wisconsin for the work that we do on veterans, depression, and suicide. So at our website, they can find out who we are, the people that work with us who are on the board, all veterans, and our podcast page.
Awesome.
Is that a good explanation?
Yeah, it is. Thank you very much.
I'm long-winded.
I appreciate you being here with us today and your authenticity and sharing so freely.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, you can share as long as you want, but if you're not going to tell the truth, then don't expect to resolve anything, and don't waste everybody's time.
Yeah, that's true.
It's really more importantly that that's why I say, forget what the world wants to see, forget what you think they want to see, and focus on what really happened, what's really in there, and go and get the answers for it, because the answers are there.
Yeah. That's perfect. All right, well, thanks, Mike. You take care for now.
You better do that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sold Out is an autobiography by Mike Orban, where he talks about panic attacks, nightmares, rage, isolation, loss of interest in family and life, close friendship with thoughts of suicide, and many more responses he was unable to resolve. Read the document that saved his life, and the powerful knowledge shared by an aunt and uncle, and the man who brought back something long ago forgotten, laughter. Most important, know there's hope and love and joy to be found. You can get a copy of Mike's book by going to the Orban Foundation for Veterans.org and requesting it in the Contact Us page.